You definitely dreamed of having superpowers as a kid. You know, like Superman and Spider-Man and all of those guys. It seems like it would totally solve all your problems even now, right? Superheroes in movies always seem to have these imaginary problems, but come on! What more could you want from this world if you're kinda like Superman or Homelander? Money, love, fulfillment, you'd have it all. But back to our world, what if you suddenly got such superpowers for real? You might think that it'd be a lot of fun, but if we're talking about a more realistic approach, things would be way more complicated. Today, you'll find out what it would be like if you, as one single person in the world, suddenly became a superhuman. How would you handle such a situation? And why you couldn't actually use your abilities as you want. But before we jump into this, just like Peter Parker got his powers after a spider's bite, you'll get yours only after you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that bell for notifications. With all of that done, let's get right into it. So, which superpowers would you like to have? Now honestly, it's not that important for now, but let's say that you're like Superman, but without that fancy attire. You can fly, you can shoot lasers out of your eyes, and you're nearly invincible. But unlike in the movies, where the superheroes seem to adapt quickly, the reality would be much more mind-blowing. The first thing you'd probably feel is total disbelief. Is this really happening? I think that many people would face a heart attack if they found themselves levitating in their room for real. And in short, the fear of the unknown would bother you like never before. Over the next few days, you'd probably be figuring out your superpowers and how to handle them. It would be tough because we don't have any guidelines on the internet, and I don't even want to think about how you'd find out that you're invincible. But then what's next? Would you tell your friends and family? The temptation would be really strong, right? But revealing your powers isn't only about trust, it's about the potential consequences. Would they see you in the same way? Could they keep your secret? Honestly, if you're smart enough, you'd probably decide not to tell anyone, because the risks are just too high. Do you really think you could be a national hero using your superpowers to keep the peace? It works that way only in the movies and comics, but in the real world, well, maybe we should just talk about it so you don't have any fairy tales. First of all, let's face it, governments would be really interested in you. Some person out of nowhere begins to decide who should be safe and who should be punished without any control. The world just doesn't work that way. The government would be the first to want to understand your powers, as well as control them if they find them valuable, and maybe even replicate them. Just imagine what a treasure you would be for the military, for example. We've already touched on this idea in another video, where we imagine a world where superheroes exist. With lots of superheroes, governments would need to make some agreements, but in your case, nobody would ask you. Even though you're invincible, it wouldn't be impossible for the government and the military to catch you, especially if we're talking about a few days with such powers and a lack of experience to use them like a pro. So if you haven't fully explored your abilities, the government would gladly help you with that. You know, all those conspiracy theories about secret government experiments. And if they aren't true now, they would definitely become a reality with you being at the center of one. You'd probably be taken to some top secret facility far away from the public eye. Firstly, they'd want to run some physical tests in order to understand how strong you are. You'd be lifting weights that were far beyond human capacity, crushing materials to see your limits, and performing tasks that push your physical boundaries. Then, to test your invincibility, you'd be subjected to various forms of harm, like fire and bullets and extreme pressure. They'd want to see if there's anything that could hurt you and understand how your body resists damage. Next up, mental and cognitive experiments. Scientists would run brain scans to see if your mental processes are different. They might put you through complex cognitive tests to see if your brain functions at superhuman levels. You'd be constantly evaluated to understand how these powers affect your mind. They'd want to know if you're more prone to aggression, how you handle stress, and if your superpowers come with any mental side effects. Also, understanding the genetic basis of your powers would be a top priority, potentially leading to attempts at genetic modification or cloning. How does your body generate the energy needed for your powers? They'd study your metabolism, look at how you process food, how quickly you heal, and any other biological differences. Then come the power-specific tests. They'd test your flying abilities under various conditions. How high and fast could you go? How do you navigate? And what physical toll does it take on you? You might be asked to hit targets, cut through materials, and use your power in different scenarios to understand its capabilities and limitations. Finally, control and conditioning. They'd likely try to condition you to follow commands, using both positive reinforcement and negative consequences. This might involve rigorous training sessions, designed to push you to your limits. They develop methods to restrain and contain you if necessary, and this could involve specialized cells, restraints that nullify your powers, or even chemical suppressants. Now, I know you already understand how important it is to keep your powers secret, but there's a little bit more to it. Beyond the experiments, your daily life would be under constant watch. Cameras and monitoring devices would track your every move, conversations would be recorded, and you'd have little to no privacy. They'd want to ensure you aren't plotting an escape or using your powers in unauthorized ways. So yeah, if you reveal your powers to the world, you would likely end up as a lab rat, poked and prodded and living under constant surveillance. And so, now we understand that you should be as careful as possible for the rest of your days. But really, what kind of life would that be? Having such abilities without being able to use them? It's like having thousands of bitcoins and intentionally throwing away the piece of paper with your account password. But let's imagine that you're an honest and kind person, and you really want to help out that granny who's being robbed by several guys with guns. Now, technically you could do that if you're not going to use your laser eyes or levitation or any other kind of superpower. But what if they start shooting at you and you're simply standing there staying alive? The thing is, in the United States, especially in big cities, cameras are everywhere. From traffic lights to building entrances, your movements can be tracked in an instant. And if you decide to use your super strength to lift a car off of someone, chances are there's a camera somewhere that's catching it all. This footage would quickly make its way to the authorities and put you on their radar. Social media is another big trap. In today's world, everybody has a camera in their pocket. Even that grandma is like a walking camera. You just never know when someone might whip out their phone and start recording. Imagine saving someone in a public place, only to find out the entire event was live streamed. And even if you're flying through the sky at night, radar systems are going to pick you up. And if you want to save a crashing plane, for example, air defense systems say hello with a series of shots. So, flying around freely is not only impractical, it's also dangerous as hell. You need to stick to remote areas, away from military installations, and avoid air traffic routes, but even then, you're still taking a huge risk. So, what are you even supposed to do in this situation? Live an ordinary life? Well, maybe, but life is really unpredictable, and anything could happen. What if we imagine the best case scenario, where the government tries to make an agreement, letting you be a real American superhero? What would that be like? Well, that's an entirely different story. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but before we get into it, just a quick reminder. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to leave a like on it right now. It really helps the channel to grow and lets us bring you weekly entertaining content. Now, let's move on to the best case scenario for you. Alright, let's imagine that the government decides to make a deal with you to control it all. They recognize your powers, and instead of trying to lock you away, they offer you a position as a real American superhero. This would come with a lot of perks, but also a lot of responsibilities. The good news is, you could finally reveal your superpowers to the world, and right after that, the social media boom would be insane. You'd instantly become the most famous person on Instagram, TikTok, and every other platform out there, and millions of followers overnight without a doubt. Brands would be lining up to sponsor you, paying top dollar for you to endorse their products. In short, your influence would be unparalleled. And financially, you'd bring in a huge amount of money for the country. You'd actually be a gold mine. The tourism industry would get a massive boost, and people from all over the world would want to visit the country to see the real-life superhero. And what about saving the world? You'd be involved in high-profile missions, saving lives and stopping disasters. The government would use your abilities for public safety, national security, and even international diplomacy. I mean, just think about it. Your presence alone could prevent war, deter criminals, and provide aid in natural disasters. You would be hailed as a national hero. But it wouldn't be all about the fame. No, not at all. With all of that comes one huge disadvantage: endless exploitation. I mean, literally endless for the rest of your life. The government would control every aspect of it. Your schedule, your appearances, your missions, everything would be dictated by them. It's essentially like in The Boys, but even worse. You'd have little to no privacy, and every move you make would be watched closely. They'd push you to your limits, expecting you to be on call 24/7. And it wouldn't change with new presidents or administrations either. Keeping you in line and controlling you would be the top priority for any government. You'd become a national asset, too valuable, too powerful to be left unchecked. Each new leader would have their own ideas and strategies, but the end goal would always be the same: control. Your life would be under constant surveillance one way or another. You'd be expected to perform heroic feats daily with no room for error or rest, and the government might even dictate who you can and cannot associate with, all in the name of national security. And in the end, being a superhero would come at a high cost. Having superpowers would definitely turn your life upside down. However, it might not feel like a blessing, but more like a curse. But still, you'd likely just end up a lab rat, as I said in the beginning. So what kind of superpowers would you like to have? I'll leave mine in the pinned comment, so feel free to share yours with us. And if you want more videos about superheroes, well, I've got one. Check out What If Superheroes Existed in Real Life, where we talk about what daily life would be like with them, and even what happens when superheroes go rogue. Thanks for watching, click on that pop-up, and let's head over there together.